Sometimes power falls into the wrong hands. June 14, 1958. Chicago. A private estate on the North Shore. 100 guests. The host was one of the city's most powerful men, Vincent Castellano. Businessman, they called him. But everyone knew the truth. Vincent controlled significant interests in Chicago's business world, both legitimate and otherwise. That evening, his party was magnificent. Crystal chandeliers, expensive champagne, luxury appetizers. A string quartet played softly in the corner, but something was missing for Vincent. Real entertainment, the kind that made people talk. Near midnight, Vincent stood in the center of the grand salon, raised his glass of whiskey high. Friends, tonight we have a very special guest, the legendary Louis Armstrong. Applause erupted through the room. Louis sat near the back at a small table. He smiled, that famous Satchmo smile. But inside, he felt uneasy, because there was something in Vincent's tone, something that wasn't quite right, something mocking. Vincent continued, his voice carrying across the silent room. Now, you all thought Louis would play his trumpet for us tonight, didn't you? Well, I've got a surprise. Tonight, Louis Armstrong will play piano for us. The room went completely silent. Everyone knew Louis Armstrong was the world's greatest trumpet player. His name was synonymous with jazz trumpet. But piano? Nobody in that room had ever seen Louis Armstrong play piano publicly. Vincent was grinning widely. Come on, Louis, don't be shy. Get up to that beautiful grand piano over there. Let's see what you've got. Louis stood slowly, that smile still fixed on his face. But in his eyes was something else. Something Vincent didn't notice because he was too busy enjoying his own cleverness. Determination. Quiet strength. Dignity that couldn't be broken, because Vincent Castellano didn't know something crucial. You couldn't diminish Louis Armstrong. You could try. You could put him in uncomfortable situations. You could attempt to embarrass him, but you couldn't succeed. Not really. Louis had survived too much, overcome too many obstacles, faced too many people who tried to make him feel small. Louis walked slowly toward the grand piano. Every eye in the room followed him. Some guests looked uncomfortable, others curious. A few were smirking, anticipating entertainment at Louis's expense. Louis sat on the piano bench, adjusted his position, placed his hands gently on the ivory keys. And from that moment on, nobody in that Chicago mansion would ever forget what happened next. Before we continue with this incredible story, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. What you're about to witness is one of the most powerful demonstrations of grace under pressure and how true talent can transform any situation. The information in this video is compiled from documented interviews, archival news, books, and historical reports. For narrative purposes, some parts are dramatized and may not represent 100% factual accuracy. We also use AI-assisted visuals and AI narration for cinematic reconstruction. The use of AI does not mean the story is fake. It is a storytelling tool. Our goal is to recreate the spirit of that era as faithfully as possible. Enjoy watching. To understand what happened that June night in Chicago, we need to go back several weeks. We need to understand what Louis Armstrong was experiencing in the spring of 1958. Because what occurred at Vincent Castellano's party wasn't random. It was the culmination of pressures Louis had been facing for months. May 20th, 1958. Louis Armstrong sat in his manager Joe Glazer's office in New York. They were discussing upcoming engagements, tours, recordings, appearances. Louis's schedule was relentless. At 56 years old, Louis had been performing professionally for over 35 years. The pace was exhausting, but what weighed on Louis even more than physical exhaustion was something else: criticism. Throughout 1957 and into 58, Louis had faced increasing criticism from younger jazz musicians and critics. They said he was too commercial, too eager to please white audiences, not serious enough about advancing jazz as an art form, not militant enough about civil rights. The bebop musicians, the modern jazz players, they looked down on Louis, called him an Uncle Tom, said he smiled too much, played too simply, was too old-fashioned. These criticisms hurt Louis deeply because Louis had dedicated his entire life to music, had pioneered jazz trumpet, had shown the world that a black musician from the poorest neighborhood in New Orleans could become internationally famous through pure talent and hard work. But now, In his 50s, he was being told he wasn't relevant anymore, that his style of jazz was outdated, that younger, more complex players had surpassed him. During that May meeting with Joe Glazer, Louis expressed his frustration. "Joe, sometimes I wonder if I should just retire. All these young cats saying I'm finished. Maybe they're right." Joe had shaken his head firmly. "Louis, don't listen to them. You're the most popular jazz musician in the world. Your tours sell out. Your records sell. People love you." But Louis knew popularity wasn't the same as respect. He wanted both, needed both, had earned both. The criticism was taking its toll, not just emotionally, but physically. Louis's blood pressure was elevated. He wasn't sleeping well. His appetite had decreased. Lucille, his wife, was worried. "Baby, you need to slow down. Take a break." But Louis couldn't slow down, because slowing down meant giving critics ammunition, meant admitting maybe they were right. So Louis kept pushing, kept performing, kept smiling even when he didn't feel like smiling. May 30th, 1958. Louis received an invitation. Vincent Castellano, a prominent Chicago businessman, was hosting a private party and wanted Louis to perform. The fee was substantial, $10,000 for one evening. Joe Glazer was excited. "Louis, this is easy money. One night. Play a few songs, done." But Louis felt hesitant. He'd heard of Vincent Castellano. Everyone in the entertainment business had. Vincent had connections throughout Chicago's nightclub scene, connections that weren't entirely legitimate. Louis didn't like performing for that crowd, but Joe insisted. "Louis, it's good business. These are influential people. Plus, the money is excellent." Reluctantly, Louis agreed. He needed the money, needed to prove he was still in demand, needed to show critics that Louis Armstrong still mattered. June 1st, 1958. Louis began preparing for the Chicago engagement. But preparing wasn't about rehearsing music. Louis could play his repertoire in his sleep. Preparing was about mentally steeling himself for whatever might come. Louis had learned over decades that certain types of wealthy people liked to collect famous performers the way others collected art. They didn't necessarily respect the artists, they just wanted to show them off, display them, sometimes even humiliate them as a demonstration of power. Louis had experienced this before, parties where he was treated more like entertainment commodity than artist, where hosts made jokes at his expense, where he was expected to smile and play and not cause trouble. Each time, Louis had maintained his dignity, played beautifully, left with his head high. He'd do the same in Chicago. June 10th, 1958, Louis flew to Chicago. Checked into a hotel, rested. The party was scheduled for June 14th, 4 days away. During those days, Louis explored Chicago, walked through neighborhoods where he'd played in the 1920s and 30s, visited old jazz clubs. Some were still there, some had closed. He saw how the city had changed, how he had changed. On June 13th, the evening before the party, Louis sat in his hotel room thinking about his career, about the journey from New Orleans poverty to international fame, about every obstacle he'd overcome, every person who'd tried to stop him, every moment of doubt. And Louis realized something. No matter what happened at Vincent Castellano's party, nobody could take away what Louis had accomplished. Nobody could diminish his legacy. Nobody could make him less than he was. This realization gave Louis peace. Whatever Vincent Castellano had planned, Louis would handle it. With grace, with dignity, with music. June 14th, 1958. The day of the party. Louis arrived at Vincent's North Shore estate at 8 in the evening. The mansion was enormous, probably 20 rooms, manicured gardens, a fountain in the circular driveway, servants everywhere. Vincent greeted Louis at the door personally. "Mr. Armstrong, so glad you could make it." His handshake was firm, too firm. Asserting dominance, Louis smiled politely. "Thank you for having me, Mr. Castellano." Vincent led Louis through the mansion to a room where Louis could leave his trumpet case and prepare. "The party starts at 9. We'll have you play around midnight. Sound good?" Louis nodded. "Whatever you need." Vincent's eyes had a glint, something Louis recognized, the look of someone planning something. Louis had seen that look before. It never meant anything good. At 9 o'clock, guests began arriving. Expensive cars pulled up the driveway, men in tailored suits, women in elegant dresses, jewelry that cost more than most people earned in a year. These were Chicago's elite, business owners, politicians, society figures, and some whose wealth came from less legal enterprises. Louis stayed in the preparation room, resting. Occasionally, staff brought him food or drinks. He nibbled politely but wasn't hungry. Around 11:30, a staff member knocked. "Mr. Armstrong, Mr. Castellano wants you in the main salon now." Louis picked up his trumpet case and followed. The main salon was magnificent, 50 feet long, 30 feet wide. Crystal chandeliers hung from ornate ceiling. A grand piano sat in one corner. About 100 guests filled the space, talking, laughing, drinking. When Louis entered, some people noticed and pointed, whispered, "That's Louis Armstrong. Satchmo himself, I wonder what he'll play." Louis found a spot near the back and waited. Vincent was holding court in the center of the room, telling stories, making people laugh. He noticed Louis and winked, that same glint in his eye. At midnight, Vincent called for attention. The room quieted, and Vincent delivered his announcement about Louis playing piano instead of trumpet. Louis felt the shift in the room immediately, the surprise, the confusion. Some guests looked uncomfortable with Vincent's obvious attempt to embarrass Louis. Others seemed intrigued by the spectacle. A few were clearly anticipating Louis's humiliation. Vincent gestured toward the piano with exaggerated courtesy. "Please, Mr. Armstrong, entertain us. Have you ever been put in a situation designed to embarrass you? How did you respond? Share your experience in the comments." Louis walked toward the piano, each step measured. Calm. He didn't rush, didn't show anger or fear, just walked. When he reached the piano, Louis set his trumpet case down carefully beside the bench, sat down, looked at the keys. The room was completely silent, everyone watching, waiting, expecting failure, expecting embarrassment, expecting entertainment at Louis's expense. Louis took a breath, placed his hands on the keys, and began to play. What came out of that piano shocked everyone in the room, because Louis Armstrong didn't just play piano, he played brilliantly. His fingers moved across the keys with confidence and skill. The melody he chose was Stardust, a song Louis had recorded many times on trumpet. But now, on piano, it sounded completely different, intimate, delicate, profoundly moving. Louis's piano playing wasn't flashy or technical in the way classical pianists played, but it had something else, soul, feeling. Decades of musical understanding poured into every note. What most people in that room didn't know, what Vincent Castellano certainly didn't know, was that Louis Armstrong had been playing piano since childhood. Growing up in New Orleans, Louis had learned piano before he learned trumpet. He wasn't a concert pianist, but he was a real musician who could play multiple instruments. Louis had chosen not to showcase his piano playing professionally because his trumpet was his voice, his signature, but he'd never stopped playing piano, used it to compose, to work out melodies, to relax. And now, forced to perform on piano at Vincent Castellano's party, Louis played with every ounce of skill and artistry he possessed. The effect on the room was immediate and profound. Conversation stopped. People set down their drinks, moved closer to the piano. Some sat on nearby chairs, others stood transfixed. The mocking smiles disappeared, replaced by genuine awe. Louis played Stardust for 4 minutes, each verse building on the last, adding subtle variations, demonstrating not just technical skill, but deep musical intelligence. When he finished, there was silence, not the anticipatory silence from before, but the stunned silence of people who'd just witnessed something unexpected and beautiful. Then, slowly, applause began. Not polite party applause, real applause, genuine appreciation. People stood, clapped harder. Some had tears in their eyes, because what Louis had done transcended the situation, transcended Vincent's attempt at humiliation. Louis had turned a moment designed to diminish him into a demonstration of pure artistry. Vincent Castellano stood near the bar, his expression complicated. The smirk was gone, replaced by something between embarrassment and respect. He tried to make Louis look foolish, and instead Louis had elevated the entire evening. Louis stood from the piano bench, turned to face the audience, and smiled, that same gentle Satchmo smile. No anger, no resentment, just grace. Vincent walked over. The room watched this interaction carefully. What would Vincent say? How would he respond to having his plan backfire so completely? Vincent extended his hand. "Mr. Armstrong, that was incredible. I had no idea you played piano like that." Louis shook his hand. "Thank you, Mr. Castellano. Piano was my first instrument, actually. before trumpet. Vincent's face showed surprise. Really? I didn't know that. Louis nodded. Most people don't. I don't talk about it much. Vincent looked at the guests watching them, looked back at Louis. And in that moment, something shifted in Vincent. He realized what he'd done. Tried to humiliate a genuine artist for what? Entertainment? Ego? Power? And Louis had responded, not with anger, but with beauty, with skill, with dignity. Vincent spoke quietly so only Louis could hear. I owe you an apology. What I did tonight, trying to put you on the spot like that, it was wrong. I'm sorry. Louis looked at Vincent, saw genuine regret. Apology accepted. Vincent hesitated. Would you play your trumpet now? If you want to, I'd be honored. Please subscribe to our channel if this story is touching your heart. What happens next shows how one moment of grace can transform not just an evening, but a life. Louis smiled. I'd be happy to. Louis opened his trumpet case, pulled out his horn, and for the next hour he played all his classics. When the Saints Go Marching In. Hello, Dolly. What a wonderful world. The party transformed, no longer a demonstration of Vincent's power and wealth, but a genuine musical experience. People danced, sang along, requested songs, and Louis, generous as always, played them all. By 2 a.m, the party was winding down. Guests thanked Louis personally as they left. That was incredible. Best party I've ever attended. You're a true artist, Mr. Armstrong. Vincent walked Louis to the door. Mr. Armstrong, thank you, not just for performing, for showing me something important tonight. Louis looked at him curiously. Vincent continued. I've spent a lot of time trying to prove I'm powerful, trying to control situations, control people. But you showed me real power isn't about control. It's about excellence, about being so good at what you do that nothing can diminish you. Louis nodded. Power that comes from hurting others isn't real power. It's fear. Real power comes from creating something beautiful, something that lifts people up. Vincent was quiet for a moment. I won't forget this lesson. Louis shook his hand. Good night, Mr. Castellano. Louis left the mansion and rode back to his hotel. Exhausted but satisfied, he'd turned a situation designed to humiliate him into a triumph. Not through confrontation or anger, but through excellence. Through being exactly who he was. In the following days, word spread through Chicago's music scene about what had happened at Vincent Castellano's party. How Vincent had tried to embarrass Louis Armstrong. How Louis had responded with stunning piano performance. How the entire evening had transformed. Musicians talked about it. Did you hear what Pops did? Played piano like he'd been doing it his whole life. Vincent Castellano tried to make him look bad, and Louis just destroyed him with talent. That's Louis. Never gets angry, just plays. Critics who dismissed Louis as too commercial had to acknowledge this story revealed something important. Louis Armstrong wasn't just a talented trumpet player who'd gotten lucky. He was a complete musician, someone whose understanding of music ran deep, someone who could excel on multiple instruments, someone whose artistry couldn't be diminished by circumstances. June 25th, 1958. 11 days after the party, Vincent Castellano did something he rarely did. He made a phone call to apologize again, called Louis's manager, Joe Glazer. Mr. Glazer, this is Vincent Castellano. I wanted to formally apologize for how I treated Mr. Armstrong at my party. It was disrespectful, and I regret it deeply. Joe, who'd heard about the incident from Louis, was surprised by the call. I appreciate you calling, Mr. Castellano. Vincent continued. I'd like to make it right. I heard Mr. Armstrong is performing at the Chicago Theater next month. I'd like to purchase tickets. Front row. For myself and my niece. Would that be possible? Joe arranged it. July 23rd, 1958. Louis Armstrong performed at the Chicago Theater. Sold-out show. 2,500 people. Among them, in the front row, sat Vincent Castellano and his 8-year-old niece, Maria. Before the show started, Vincent and Maria were brought backstage. Louis was in his dressing room preparing. When Vincent walked in with Maria, Louis stood and smiled. Mr. Castellano, good to see you again. Vincent looked different, humbler. Mr. Armstrong, I wanted you to meet someone special. This is my niece, Maria. Maria looked at Louis with wide eyes. Are you really Louis Armstrong? Louis knelt down to her level. I really am. You like music, Maria? She nodded enthusiastically. I'm learning piano. My uncle says you play piano too. Louis smiled. I do. Been playing since I was about your age. Maria's eyes got even wider. Really? Vincent spoke up. Maria's been practicing every day since I told her about your performance at my party. She wants to be a musician. Louis looked at the little girl, saw the passion in her eyes, the same passion he'd had at her age. Maria, if you love music, you practice every day. And remember, music isn't about being the best or the fanciest. It's about sharing something from your heart. Maria nodded seriously. I will, Mr. Armstrong. Vincent handed Louis a bouquet of flowers. These are for you, from both of us, as thanks, and as apology. Louis accepted them gracefully. Thank you. That's very kind. Vincent's voice was emotional. Mr. Armstrong, what you did at my party, you didn't just play beautifully. You taught me something about dignity, about responding to disrespect with excellence instead of anger. I've thought about it every day since. Louis put a hand on Vincent's shoulder. We all make mistakes. What matters is learning from them. Vincent looked at his niece, then back at Louis. I want Maria to grow up differently than I did. I want her to understand that real strength is in creating beautiful things, not in tearing others down. You showed me that. Louis smiled. Then my job here is done. They talked for a few more minutes. Maria asked Louis questions about music, about his trumpet, about New Orleans. Louis answered each one patiently, kindly. When it was time for the show to start, Vincent and Maria returned to their seats. Louis walked onto that Chicago theater stage to thunderous applause, and during his performance, Louis spotted Vincent and Maria in the front row. Maria was transfixed, watching every move Louis made, absorbing everything. Vincent watched too, but he wasn't just watching a performance. He was watching a master, someone who'd turned Vincent's attempt at humiliation into a teaching moment, someone who'd responded to cruelty with grace, someone who'd shown that true power comes from excellence, not dominance. After the concert, Vincent took Maria home. On the drive, she couldn't stop talking. Uncle Vincent, did you see how he played? Did you hear those notes? I want to play like that. Vincent smiled. Then you practice, sweetheart, every day? Maria looked at her uncle. Uncle Vincent, why were you so nice to Mr. Armstrong tonight? You brought him flowers. Vincent was quiet for a moment. Because, Maria, I wasn't nice to him before. I tried to embarrass him, but instead of getting mad, he showed me what real class looks like. So I wanted to say thank you, and sorry. Maria thought about this. That was good of you, Uncle Vincent. Vincent nodded. Mr. Armstrong taught me that being big doesn't mean making others feel small. It means making others feel lifted up. That lesson stuck with Vincent Castellano. In the years that followed, he changed how he conducted business, became less about power displays and more about legitimate partnerships. Stopped trying to dominate every situation, started treating people with more respect. He never forgot June 14th, 1958, the night he tried to humiliate Louis Armstrong and learned the most important lesson of his life. Maria grew up to become a music teacher. She never became famous like Louis Armstrong, but she taught hundreds of students over her career, and she always told them the story about the night her Uncle Vincent took her backstage to meet Louis Armstrong, about how Louis had been kind to a little girl and gracious to a man who'd wronged him. Mr. Armstrong showed me, Maria would tell her students, that music is about more than notes. It's about character, about who you are when someone tries to diminish you, about responding to darkness with light. Louis Armstrong performed for another 13 years after that night in Chicago. He never publicly told the story about Vincent Castellano's party, never used it to embarrass Vincent or boost his own image. It wasn't his style, but those who were there never forgot. The 100 guests who'd witnessed what happened, they told people. And the story spread, not as gossip, but as legend. The legend of Louis Armstrong playing piano at a party where the host tried to embarrass him, and turning humiliation into transcendence. Today, jazz historians recognize that night as significant for another reason. It revealed a dimension of Louis Armstrong that had been hidden. His piano skills, his complete musicianship, his ability to excel not just in one area, but across multiple instruments. Recordings from later in Louis' career occasionally featured him on piano, and listeners who knew the Castellano story heard those piano tracks differently, heard the depth, the skill, The years of practice that Louis had never advertised, because Louis didn't need to advertise. His talent spoke for itself. The Chicago theater where Louis performed in July 1958 is still standing, still hosting performances, and occasionally when pianists perform there, they're told the story. About Louis Armstrong, about Vincent Castellano, about a little girl named Maria, about how one evening in 1958, grace defeated arrogance, kindness defeated cruelty, excellence defeated the attempt to diminish it. June 14th, 1958. A night that started with one man trying to prove his power by humiliating another. A night that ended with that man learning true power comes from lifting others up, not tearing them down. A night when Louis Armstrong, once again, showed the world that the greatest strength is gentleness, the greatest power is humility, the greatest victory is responding to attempts at humiliation not with anger, but with art. Vincent Castellano lived another 30 years after that night. He never forgot, never stopped being grateful, never stopped telling people, Louis Armstrong changed my life, not by getting revenge, by being excellent. And when Vincent passed away in 1988, among his possessions was a photograph. From that July 1958 backstage visit, Vincent, Maria, and Louis Armstrong. All smiling, Louis in the middle, one hand on Vincent's shoulder, the other on Maria's. 3 people, connected by music, by grace, by the lesson that it's never too late to learn. Never too late to change. Never too late to understand what really matters. Tonight, somewhere, someone is trying to humiliate someone else, trying to make themselves feel big by making another person feel small, trying to exert power through diminishment. The story of Louis Armstrong and Vincent Castellano reminds us there's another way. When someone tries to embarrass you, you can respond with excellence. When someone tries to diminish you, you can respond with grace. When someone tries to make you small, you can show them what greatness really looks like, not through domination, through artistry, through being so good at what you do, so secure in who you are, that no external attempt at humiliation can touch you. Louis Armstrong knew this, lived this, demonstrated this, not just on June 14, 1958, but throughout his entire life. That's why Louis Armstrong wasn't just a great musician, he was a great human being, someone who understood that true victory isn't in defeating your enemies. It's in transforming them, not through force, through example, through showing them a better way to be. Vincent Castellano came to that party planning to humiliate Louis Armstrong. He left having learned the most important lesson of his life. That's transformation. That's power. That's Louis Armstrong's true legacy. Not the music, magnificent as it was, but the example of how to live with dignity, how to respond to cruelty with grace, how to turn moments designed to break you into moments that define you. The grand piano in Vincent Castellano's mansion still sits in that North Shore estate. The house has changed hands multiple times since 1958, but the current owners know the story about the night Louis Armstrong played that piano and turned humiliation into triumph. They keep the piano tuned, occasionally play it themselves, and sometimes they imagine they can still hear Louis's notes, gentle, powerful, transforming, forever.